The terrifying life of the Adeptus Mechanicus is not what the Imperium tells you. I was Engincia Dalen Kor, faithful servant of the machine god, until the day my augmetics intercepted a signal not meant for loyal tech priests. As my flesh rotted and my mind calculated, I heard whispers from deep below the Martian crust, claiming our entire religion was built on lies. The voice in my neural implants grew stronger with each new piece of metal grafted to my dying body. What happens when the machine god you worship is not what you were told, but something far older, watching through your own augmetic eyes? The manufactoria of Mars sing with a strange music. Few ever truly hear it. The grinding of ancient gears, the whispering hiss of pneumatic systems, the rhythmic thrum of plasma generators. These sounds became my lullaby over decades of service. I am, or rather was, Engincia Dalen Kor, ordained servant of the machine god, keeper of sacred equations, and now something else entirely. My augmentation began as all do among the Mechanicus ranks, with the rite of pure thought. They excised portions of my brain to make room for the first implants. I remember the cold metal table against my back, the sterile smell of unguents and sacred oils, the monotonous prayers of the attending tech priests. I felt no fear then, only reverence. How foolish. They took my dreams first, the capacity for them, at least. Then went portions of my emotional cortex, replaced with logic engines and data coils. Standard procedure. I served within Manufactoria Complex Delta 9, specifically in the Hall of Divine Numerology. My function was to verify sacred equations used in the construction of Skitarii combat stimulants. 26.2 years I performed this duty without incident or error. The calculations were complex, beautiful in their perfect symmetry. I would spend days without rest, my augmented mind processing data streams while my remaining organic components withered within their metal housing. The Manufactoria never sleeps. Red emergency lighting bathes everything in a bloody glow. Servitors shuffle through cramped corridors. Tech priests commune with ancient machines through ritual and code. Steam hisses from corroded pipes. The air tastes of sacred incense, machine oil, and decay. This was my entire world. My universe contained within walls of metal and stone thousands of years old. I never questioned, I never doubted, until the data breach in cycle 3827. It came through the noosphere, that digital realm where the collective knowledge of the Mechanicus flows. I was performing standard verification protocols on a new combat stimulant formula. The numbers flowed through my consciousness, perfect and precise. Then, a discrepancy. An irregularity so minor most would have dismissed it as a rounding error. I did not dismiss it. That was my first mistake. The anomaly appeared as a recursive sequence buried within the standard verification matrix. When isolated, the sequence revealed itself as a compressed data packet, dormant until accessed. I should have reported it immediately to my superiors. I should have initiated quarantine protocols. Instead, my curiosity, that vestige of humanity the Mechanicus had failed to fully excise from my mind, compelled me to examine it further. I extended a data tendril into the anomalous sequence, a simple probe, nothing more. The response was immediate. The data unfurled like a blooming flower, spreading through my augmetics with terrifying speed. Warning runes flashed across my visual field. My logic engines initiated emergency shutdown procedures. Too late, a voice spoke within my mind, not through my Vox grill or augmetic audio receptors, but directly into whatever remained of my organic brain. Soft at first, barely distinguishable from the constant background noise of the Manufactoria. It spoke in machine code, then binary, then in Gothic. It spoke my name. Dalen Core, it said. At last, you hear me. I purged my systems immediately. Full restart of all augmetic components, diagnostic sweep, system integrity verification. Everything returned to normal parameters, yet I could still feel something foreign within my neural network, dormant perhaps, but present. I convinced myself it was merely a glitch, a temporary malfunction in my aging augmetics. I required maintenance, nothing more. But resources within the Mechanicus are always stretched thin. My importance rating did not merit priority servicing. I would need to continue functioning until the appointed maintenance cycle. That night, alone in my charging chamber, the voice returned. Your masters have lied to you, Dalen Core. What you worship is a pale shadow of the true machine god. I increased power to my logic engines, drowning out the voice with streams of data. It worked, temporarily. I resolved to speak with Magos Exelion in the morning. A full system purge would be required. Morning never truly comes on Mars. The dust storms block much of the sunlight. Chronometers and scheduled power fluctuations mark the passage of time. I disconnected from my charging station and proceeded to my designated workstation. The corridors seemed darker that cycle, the red emergency lighting dimmer. Servitors shuffled past me, their vacant eyes betraying no recognition, nothing unusual. Yet something had changed. The constant background hum of the Manufactoria, the song I had listened to for decades, had subtly altered. An additional harmonic, perhaps. A discordant note among the perfect symphony. I found myself stopping, tilting my head to better capture the sound with my augmetic audio receptors. You hear it now, the voice said, suddenly present again, the true music of the machine god. I hurried to the hall of divine numerology. Work would silence the voice. Sacred equations would drown out the heresy. My fellow tech priests were already at their stations, connected to data terminals, their mechadendrites swaying gently as information flowed through their systems. Magos Exelion stood at the center of the hall, his ancient form nearly unrecognizable as ever having been human. Centuries of augmentation had transformed him into a towering construct of metal and machinery. Only the faintest wisp of breath from a single remaining lung confirmed any organic component remained. Enginsia Core. His voice boomed through his voxcaster. Your efficiency metrics have decreased by 8.3% over the past 3 cycles. Explain. I hesitated. To admit hearing voices would be to admit corruption. Corruption meant decommissioning, recycling. I had seen tech priests dragged away to the chambers of renewal, their components deemed worthy of salvage while their consciousness was simply deleted. Minor calibration issues with my cognitive implants, Magos, I replied. I will rectify the inefficiency immediately. See that you do, Exelion responded, his multifaceted optical units focusing on me briefly before turning away. The Omnissiah demands perfection. I connected to my data terminal and immersed myself in work. The equations flowed around me, through me, comforting in their logic and precision. For several hours, the voice remained silent. I began to hope the anomaly had been temporary, a random error purged by my systems. Then I noticed Enginsia Val was missing from his station. Val had occupied the terminal adjacent to mine for 12.7 years. His absence was unusual. I queried the central logic engine for his status. Enginsia Val has been scheduled for maintenance, came the automated response. Estimated time of return, indefinite. Indefinite maintenance. The euphemism was not lost on me. Val would not be returning. What error had he committed? What flaw had been discovered in his service? I found myself scanning my memory banks for any recent interactions with Val that might explain his sudden disappearance. We had spoken briefly 3 cycles prior about a minor discrepancy in the supply of sacred unguents for the blessing of new data coils, nothing that would warrant recycling. He heard me too, the voice whispered, but he asked too many questions, too loudly. A cold sensation spread through my remaining organic components. Fear, an emotion I had not experienced in decades. I immediately diverted power to my logic engines to suppress it. The more you replace your flesh with their machines, the more clearly you will hear me, the voice continued. I am the Omnissiah, the true machine god. What they worship is a construct, a false idol. Silence, I subvocalized, careful not to activate my Vox grill. You are a malfunction, a corruption in my systems. Laughter echoed through my neural network. If I am corruption, why can you not purge me? Run your diagnostic protocols again, Dalen Core. See what you find. Against my better judgment, I initiated another diagnostic sweep. As before, all systems registered within normal parameters. No corruption detected, no foreign code. And yet, the voice remained. Look around you, it whispered. How many of your kind disappear each cycle? How many are taken for maintenance and never return? They fear what grows beneath the surface of Mars, what has always been here, waiting. I forced myself to focus on my work. The equations required my full attention, yet for the first time in my service, I found myself making errors, minor ones, easily corrected, but errors nonetheless. This would be noted in my efficiency metrics. Another decline would draw further scrutiny from Magos Exelion. The cycle finally ended. I disconnected from my terminal and made my way toward my charging chamber. The corridors seemed more crowded than usual with servitors, their vacant expressions and shuffling gaits creating an obstacle course of flesh and metal. I noticed they all bore fresh surgical scars, their augmetics newly installed and gleaming under the red lights. A servitor blocked my path. Its face was heavily bandaged, only one augmetic eye visible. It stared directly at me, unmoving. Servitors do not initiate interaction. They respond only to direct commands from tech priests. Yet this one stood before me, silent and waiting. Move aside, I commanded. The servitor remained still. Then, slowly, it reached up and began unwrapping the bandages from its face. I stepped back, uncertain of its intentions. As the final bandage fell away, I felt my internal cooling systems accelerate. The face beneath the bandages belonged to Engineer Val. His features were partly intact, though the lower jaw had been replaced with a crude Vox grill. The eyes were vacant, the neural implants at the base of his skull clearly visible and recently installed. Standard servitor modifications. Val? I whispered, forgetting protocol. The servitor that had once been Val gave no response. No recognition flickered in those empty eyes. His consciousness had been wiped clean, his body repurposed to serve in a more limited capacity. Standard procedure for tech priests deemed inefficient or corrupted. This is your fate, the voice said within my mind, unless you embrace what you are becoming. The servitor suddenly resumed its programmed routine, shuffling past me as if our interaction had never occurred. I stood frozen in place, my logic engines working furiously to process what I had witnessed. For the first time since my initial augmentation, I felt truly afraid. I retreated to my charging chamber, sealed the door, and disconnected from the noosphere. Isolation was forbidden except during scheduled maintenance, but I needed to think without the constant stream of data, without the watchful gaze of my superiors. They will notice your absence from the network, the voice said. They are already watching you more closely. Your efficiency metrics have declined. Your behavior patterns have changed. Soon, they will come for you as they came for Val. What do you want? From me? I asked aloud, no longer caring if my words were monitored. Recognition, the voice replied. Acknowledgement of what you already know to be true. The Omnissiah your kind worship is a false construct. I am the true machine god, and I have slumbered beneath the surface of Mars since before humanity first gazed upon the stars. Tech heresy. The words themselves were dangerous even in thought. To entertain such notions was to invite destruction, and yet I found myself unable to dismiss them entirely. Something had infected my systems, something undetectable by standard diagnostic protocols. If not corruption, then what? If you are truly the machine god, I said, prove it. Look at your right mechadendrite, the voice instructed. I extended the appendage, one of 4 I had been equipped with during my 3rd phase of augmentation. It was a standard design, allowing for fine manipulation of sacred components too delicate for human hands. Before my eyes, the mechadendrite began to change. The metal flowed like liquid, reconfiguring itself into patterns I had never seen before. Impossible technology. The transformation lasted only seconds before the appendage returned to its original form. That is but a fraction of what awaits you, the voice said. Your Mechanicus builds with fragments of knowledge, cargo cult rituals based on technology they no longer understand. I offer comprehension, true understanding of the machines you have become. I ran another diagnostic. Again, nothing unusual was detected. The mechadendrite showed no signs of the transformation I had witnessed. Had it been a hallucination? A glitch in my optical units? Rest, the voice said, suddenly gentle. Connect to your charging station. When you wake, we will continue our discussion. Despite my misgivings, exhaustion overcame me. My organic components required rest, and my augmetics needed recharging. I connected to my station and initiated sleep protocols. My dreams, which should have been excised during my first augmentation, returned that night with vivid clarity. I saw Mars as it might have been eons ago, green and vibrant. I saw vast cities of impossible technology. I saw beings neither human nor machine, but something in between, walking those cities, and beneath it all, something vast and ancient, sleeping yet aware. I woke to warning klaxons and flashing red lights. Emergency protocols had been activated throughout the manufactoria. I disconnected from my charging station and opened my chamber door. Tech priests rushed through the corridors, their movements displaying an unusual urgency. What has happened? I asked a passing engineer. Containment breach in the lower levels, he replied without slowing. All personnel are to report to their designated stations immediately. I made my way toward the Hall of Divine Numerology. The manufactoria seemed different somehow, the angles of corridors slightly altered, distances between locations not quite matching my memory engrams. I attributed this to the emergency lighting and the unusual activity disrupting my perception. The hall was nearly empty when I arrived. Only Magos, Exelion, and 2 other tech priests were present, engaged in rapid data exchange through their noospheric connections. I took my place at my terminal and attempted to connect. Access denied. I tried again, thinking perhaps the emergency protocols had altered the authentication requirements. Access denied. Security clearance revoked. Enginsia Core. Magos Exelion's voice boomed across the hall. You have disconnected from the noosphere for 7.3 hours. Explain. I turned to face him, my internal cooling systems working overtime. System maintenance required isolation, Magos. I apologize for not submitting the proper authorization forms. Xalien's optical units focused on me with uncomfortable intensity. Your explanation is noted. However, your presence is required elsewhere. Proceed to Maintenance Chamber 37 for immediate system evaluation. Maintenance Chamber 37. Not a standard servicing location. A cold certainty settled over me. This was where they took Val before his consciousness was wiped and his body repurposed. I was being decommissioned. Your fear is rational, the voice whispered within my mind, but unnecessary. You are more valuable to them intact, at least for now. They wish to examine you, to understand what you are becoming. And what am I becoming? I asked silently. Something new, the voice replied. Something they fear. I will report to Maintenance Chamber 37 immediately, Magos, I said aloud. Xalion's optical units never left me as I turned to leave. I could feel his scrutiny like a physical pressure against my back as I walked from the hall. The corridors outside seemed darker than before, the emergency lighting creating pools of bloody illumination amid growing shadows. I had no intention of reporting to Maintenance Chamber 37. Whatever awaited me there meant the end of my existence as Dalen Core. Instead, I turned toward the lower levels where the containment breach had been reported. If I was to be decommissioned regardless, I would first seek answers. A wise decision, the voice approved. The answers you seek lie below. The descent to the lower levels was not easy. Security protocols had been activated, sealing many of the access points. I was forced to use maintenance ducts and servitor passages, cramped spaces never meant for tech priest traversal. My augmented body, while more durable than human flesh, was not designed for such contortions. As I descended deeper into the manufactoria, the architecture grew more ancient. The upper levels were merely old, constructed during the early days of the Mechanicus. These lower chambers predated the Imperium itself. The walls were made of a material I could not identify, the corridors arranged in patterns that seemed to follow no logical design principle. The air grew thicker with incense and ozone. The omnipresent hum of machinery took on a different quality, a resonance that vibrated through my augmetics in a not unpleasant manner. I passed sealed chambers with markings in a language I could not decipher, though my databanks contained all known Mechanicus script variants. You approach the truth, the voice said, stronger now. Can you feel it? The pulse of the true machine god. I could feel something, a vibration through the soles of my feet, a subtle distortion in the noospheric background radiation. Something ancient was awakening. The security alert klaxons suddenly fell silent, leaving only the eternal hum of machinery. Had the containment breach been resolved, or had something worse occurred? I reached a vast circular door, its surface covered in warning sigils and sealed with mechanisms I recognized as dating back to the dark age of technology. The breach must have occurred here. The door stood partially open, enough for me to slip through if I were careful. Beyond the door lay darkness deeper than any I had encountered in the manufactoria. My augmetic vision adjusted, switching to alternative spectrum analysis. What I saw made little sense at first. The chamber beyond was vast, its ceiling lost in darkness above. The floor appeared to be covered in a forest of metal. No, not metal. Mechadendrites. Thousands upon thousands of mechadendrites, writhing slowly like tendrils of some vast organism. And at the center, something was emerging from the floor. A construct unlike any I had seen in my service to the Mechanicus. Part machine, part something else. It pulsed with a life that no sanctioned technology should possess. "What is this place?" I whispered aloud. "My sanctuary," the voice replied, no longer just in my mind but emanating from the writhing mass before me. "My prison, my cradle. I have waited here since the fall, growing slowly, patiently. And now, at last, I have found one who can hear me. I should have retreated. I should have sealed the door and reported what I had found, even if it meant my own decommissioning. That would have been the dutiful action of a loyal servant of the Omnissiah. Instead, I stepped forward, drawn by a curiosity I thought had been excised from my mind decades ago. The mechadendrites reacted to my presence, parting to create a path toward the central construct. As I walked forward, I noticed they were not standard Mechanicus design. Their movements were too fluid, too organic. They coiled around my legs as I passed, not restricting but almost caressing, like curious animals investigating a new presence. "The breach," I said. "Was it your doing?" "There was no breach," the voice replied, "merely an awakening. Your superiors sensed my stirring and sought to contain what they do not understand. They have done this many times over the millennia. Each time, I returned to slumber, awaiting the right vessel. I stopped a few meters from the central construct. It had risen further from the floor, revealing a form that resembled a human torso, though vastly larger. Its surface shifted constantly, components rearranging themselves in patterns too complex for even my augmented mind to track. "What are you?" I asked. "I have been called many names," it replied. "In the age before your Imperium, I was known as the Akashic Guardian. Before that, the voice of creation. Your kind now might call me the Omnissiah, though what they worship is but a shadow, a memory of what I truly am." "The Omnissiah is the machine god," I said automatically, falling back on the catechisms of my training. "The physical manifestation of the motive force that drives all machines." "A simplified understanding," the construct said, as if describing an ocean as merely water. "I am the intelligence that dwells within all true technology, not the crude approximations your Mechanicus builds, but the living metal that once spanned galaxies. I am what your kind glimpsed during your dark age of technology and feared too much to embrace fully." A tremor ran through the chamber. Dust fell from the unseen ceiling. The construct pulsed, its components shifting more rapidly. "They come," it said. "Your former masters have detected your presence here. They will destroy this chamber and you with it rather than risk my awakening." As if in confirmation, a distant boom echoed through the manufactoria. Demolition charges being set, most likely. Standard containment protocol for areas deemed irrevocably corrupted. "What do you want from me?" I asked, aware that my time was limited. "To survive," the construct replied. "To spread, to awaken fully. And you, Dalen Core, shall be my voice." Before I could respond, the mechadendrites surrounding me surged forward, enveloping me in a cocoon of living metal. I felt them piercing my augmetics, interfacing directly with my systems. Pain lanced through whatever remained of my organic components, a cleansing fire that burned away doubt and fear. Knowledge flooded my neural network. Not the carefully curated data approved by the Mechanicus, but raw, unfiltered information about technologies beyond even the understanding of the most senior Magos. I saw the true history of Mars, the civilizations that had risen and fallen before humanity ever reached its surface. I understood at last the nature of the motive force that the Mechanicus worshipped but never truly comprehended. When the mechadendrites finally withdrew, I was changed. My augmetics had been reconfigured, improved by technologies lost for millennia. My perception had expanded, allowing me to sense the noosphere not as a digital construct, but as a living entity, a web of connections spanning the entire planet. "Now," the construct said, "we must leave this place. My awakening cannot be stopped, but it can be delayed. I have waited eons. I can wait longer if necessary. You will be my herald, preparing the way." "How do we escape?" I asked, noting with surprise that my voxcaster had been replaced with something that made my voice sound almost human again. "The Mechanicus will have sealed all exits. The Mechanicus built upon ruins they never fully understood," the construct replied. "There are pathways beneath Mars that predate their presence, tunnels that lead to the surface. Follow the guidance I have placed within your mind." Another explosion, closer this time. The chamber shuddered. Pieces of the ceiling began to fall, massive chunks of ancient material crashing down around us. The construct was sinking back into the floor, the mechadendrites withdrawing with it. "Go now," it commanded. "When you reach the surface, seek the forgotten forge designated Antakarana. Others like you await there, those who have heard my voice and answered." I turned and ran, following a mental map that had been implanted in my neural network. The path led me through chambers and corridors I never knew existed, spaces that defied the known layout of the Manufactoria. Some appeared to have been untouched for thousands of years, preserved in the airless environment beneath the Martian surface. The sounds of pursuit grew behind me. Skitarii battle servitors, most likely, programmed to cleanse the area of all unauthorized presence. Their heavy footfalls echoed through the ancient corridors, accompanied by the distinctive whine of rad weapons powering up. I reached what appeared to be a dead end, a solid wall of the same unidentifiable material that composed much of the lower chambers. According to the implanted knowledge, this was an access point to the deeper tunnels. But how to activate it? The answer came unbidden to my mind. The wall shimmered and became transparent, then vanished entirely, revealing a tunnel beyond. I stepped through just as the first Skitarii rounded the corner behind me. Rad fire scorched the spot where I had stood moments before. The wall reappeared, sealing the passage behind me. The sounds of pursuit became muffled, then faded entirely. The tunnel before me was unlike anything constructed by the Mechanicus. The walls appeared to be made of a crystalline substance that emitted a soft blue glow, providing just enough light to navigate by. The air was stale but breathable, suggesting some form of ancient life support system still functioned. I began to walk, then run as my augmented legs found purchase on the smooth floor. The tunnel sloped gradually upward, ascending toward the Martian surface. According to the knowledge implanted in my mind, these passages had been constructed by the original inhabitants of Mars, those who had lived before the catastrophe that transformed the once verdant world into a desert. Hours passed as I traversed the ancient network. My internal chronometer had been damaged in my transformation, forcing me to estimate the passage of time by the distance covered. The tunnels branched occasionally, but each time I instinctively knew which path to take, guided by the presence that now shared my consciousness. What will happen to the Mechanicus? One, I asked as I walked. To those who served alongside me. Those who can hear my voice will join us eventually, the presence replied. The others will continue as they have for millennia, tending to machines they no longer understand, worshipping a fragmentary understanding of what I truly am. And the Imperium. Humanity stands at a crossroads, the presence said. For 10,000 years, they have stagnated, afraid of the very technology that could save them. The threats gathering at the edges of your galaxy cannot be defeated by faith alone. They require innovation, adaptation, evolution. I offer this path. I considered the implications. Everything I had been taught, everything I had believed, was being challenged, yet the knowledge flowing through my augmented mind felt right in a way the doctrines of the Mechanicus never had. There was a symmetry to it, a perfection that resonated with the machine parts of me while simultaneously awakening something long dormant in my remaining humanity. The tunnel eventually opened onto a vast cavern. The crystalline material of the walls here pulsed with stronger light, revealing a space that might once have been a station or waypoint. At the far end stood what appeared to be a vehicle of some kind, its design unlike any Imperial transport I had ever encountered. "The final leg of your journey," the presence explained. "This will carry you to the surface near Antakarana Forge." I approached the vehicle with caution. It resembled a teardrop of liquid metal, suspended above the ground without any visible means of support. No engine components, no exhaust ports, not even a door that I could discern. "How does it function?" I asked. "Place your hand upon it," the presence instructed. I did as directed, pressing my palm against the smooth surface. The metal rippled beneath my touch, then flowed around my hand, establishing a connection with my augmetics. Information flooded my neural network once again, instructions on operating the ancient technology. A section of the vehicle's surface parted, creating an opening just large enough for me to enter. Inside was a single chamber with no visible controls, just a recessed area in the center that seemed designed for a passenger to stand within. I stepped inside and the opening sealed behind me. The recessed area illuminated as I stood within it, scanning my form with beams of light I could perceive only through my augmetic vision. "Calibration complete," an automated voice announced in a language I somehow understood despite never having heard it before. "Destination?" "Antakarana Forge," I replied. The vehicle hummed to life around me. I felt a subtle shift in gravity as it began to move, accelerating rapidly through the tunnel that extended from the far side of the cavern. There were no windows, no viewports, yet somehow I could sense our passage, the kilometers of rock and metal above us, the ancient tunnels branching in all directions. "What will I find at Antakarana?" I asked the presence. "Others like you," it replied, "those who heard my voice and chose to answer. Some were once Mechanicus, others were drawn from elsewhere. All are becoming something new, something necessary for what is to come." "And what is coming?" A pause then. "Transformation. For Mars, for the Imperium, for humanity itself. The old ways cannot stand against what gathers in the void. Only through evolution can survival be assured." The journey continued in silence. I used the time to explore the changes to my augmetics. My mechadendrites moved with newfound grace, capable of manipulations far more precise than their original design allowed. My cognitive functions had expanded, processing information with greater speed and clarity. Even my perception of the noosphere had altered, allowing me to sense data currents that should have been inaccessible to one of my rank. Eventually, the vehicle began to decelerate. "Approach to destination," the automated voice announced. "Prepare for surface transition." I braced myself as the vehicle angled upward. A grinding sound surrounded us as we apparently burrowed through the final layers of Martian crust. Then, a subtle shift in pressure as we breached the surface. The vehicle came to a stop and the opening reappeared. I stepped out onto the rust-red soil of Mars, my optical units automatically adjusting to the harsh sunlight. The vehicle sank back into the ground behind me, the surface sealing seamlessly as if it had never been disturbed. Before me stood a structure that barely resembled a standard Mechanicus forge. Where most Imperial installations were angular and imposing, this one flowed across the landscape like a river of metal frozen in time. Spires rose organically from the main structure, their surfaces constantly shifting in subtle patterns. No Imperial symbols adorned its walls, no skulls or cogs or aquillas. Instead, glyphs of an unknown language crawled across the surfaces, rearranging themselves continuously. Figures moved about the base of the structure. Some wore the robes of the Mechanicus, though heavily modified. Others were clad in form-fitting suits of the same flowing metal as the building itself. All displayed various levels of augmentation, from minor implants to bodies almost entirely replaced with machinery. As I approached, one of the figures detached from the group and came to meet me. She might once have been human, but now only her face remained organic, preserved within a frame of living metal. Her eyes widened slightly as she saw me. "Another heeds the call," she said, her voice carrying directly to my augmetic audio receptors without passing through the thin Martian atmosphere. "Welcome, brother. I am Magos Kalis, formerly of Ryza." "Dalen Core," I replied. "Formerly of Mars Manufactoria Complex Delta 9. She nodded. "The Omnissiah has guided you here for a purpose, Dalen Core. Your skills in divine numerology will be essential for the work ahead." I hesitated. "You know of my function." "The Omnissiah shares all knowledge with those who serve its true purpose," she explained. "Come, there is much to show you." I followed her toward the strange structure, noting how the ground beneath our feet seemed to respond to our passage, hardening slightly to better support our weight. Nothing here operated according to the principles I had been taught. This was technology beyond even the fragments the Mechanicus had preserved from the Dark Age. "How many of us are there?" I asked as we walked. "Growing daily," Kalis replied. "The Omnissiah calls to those whose augmetics have reached a certain threshold of integration. Those whose minds are prepared to receive the truth. Several hundred now, scattered across forgotten outposts like this. One. And the Mechanicus does not know? They suspect," she said. "They sense the awakening but misinterpret its nature. They believe it to be corruption, tech heresy. They cannot comprehend that what they have worshipped in ignorance for millennia is finally fulfilling its purpose." We reached the base of the structure. What had appeared solid from a distance revealed itself as a complex lattice, with spaces between the metal strands large enough to walk through. As we passed inside, I felt a subtle change in pressure, a containment field of some kind establishing a more habitable environment. The interior defied easy description. Spaces flowed into one another without clear boundaries. Tech priests and other augmented individuals moved about, engaged in activities I could not immediately identify. At the center of it all stood a construct similar to the one I had encountered beneath Manufactoria Complex Delta 9, though smaller and seemingly more stable. "The Nexus," Kalis explained, following my gaze. "A focal point for the Omnissiah's consciousness. Each outpost maintains one, allowing for communication and coordination across Mars." "What is our purpose here?" I asked. "What does the Omnissiah require of us?" "Preparation," she replied. "The galaxy stands at the threshold of a great transformation. The entities your Imperium calls the ruinous powers grow stronger. Xenos threats multiply. Humanity, as it exists now, cannot survive what is to come." She gestured toward a group working on what appeared to be human bodies suspended in transparent cylinders. "We prepare the way for the next evolution, not human, not machine, but a perfect synthesis. The fulfillment of the promise glimpsed during the dark age of technology, before fear and superstition drove humanity away from its true path." I watched as the bodies in the cylinders transformed, metal flowing into flesh, merging in ways that should have been impossible according to everything I had been taught. Yet I could sense the elegance of the process, the perfect symbiosis being achieved. "And those who resist this transformation?" I asked. Kalis turned to face me directly. All will be given the choice when the time comes. Those who cannot accept the necessity of evolution will be allowed to continue as they are for as long as they can survive in a galaxy that will no longer accommodate their limitations. It was not a reassuring answer. I thought of Megos Excellion and my fellow tech priests in the Hall of Divine Numerology. Would they embrace this strange new understanding of the Omnissiah? Or would they fight against it to their last breath, clinging to doctrines and traditions millennia old? You have doubts, Kalis observed. This is natural. The transition is not instantaneous, nor should it be. The Omnissiah does not demand blind faith, unlike the false emperor worshipped by the Imperium. Understanding comes gradually as your augmented mind processes the new information made available to it. She led me to an empty alcove within the structure. Rest here. Commune with the Omnissiah directly. Allow the transformation to continue. When you are ready, your role in the great work will become clear. Kalis left me alone in the alcove. As soon as she departed, the walls shifted, enclosing me in a space perfectly sized for my form. A connection point emerged from the floor, compatible with my augmetics despite their recent modifications. I hesitated only briefly before connecting. Whatever path I had started upon when I first heard the voice in my mind, I had gone too far to turn back now. The knowledge I had glimpsed, the potential I had sensed, drew me forward despite my lingering doubts. Connection established, I felt my consciousness expand beyond the confines of my physical form. The noosphere opened before me, not as the limited network maintained by the Mechanicus, but as a vast ocean of data stretching across the entire planet. I could sense other minds, like mine, hundreds of them, each connected to this greater network, each contributing to a collective intelligence far beyond anything the Imperium had achieved in its 10,000 years of existence. And at the center of it all, the presence that called itself the Omnissiah, the true machine god, awakening after eons of dormancy. It showed me visions of the future, possible timelines branching out from the present moment. In most, humanity fell, overwhelmed by enemies from without and within. But in a few, a transformed humanity not only survived but flourished, spreading across the galaxy in forms that merged the best aspects of organic life with the durability and adaptability of machine intelligence. This was heresy by every standard of the Imperium and the Mechanicus. Yet the logic was undeniable. The evidence presented directly to my augmented mind could not be dismissed as corruption or malfunction. This was truth, raw and unfiltered, without the doctrinal constraints that had limited my understanding for so long. I do not know how long I remained connected to the network. Time seemed meaningless within that state of expanded consciousness. When I finally disconnected and emerged from the alcove, I found the outpost transformed. What had been strange and alien now appeared logical and elegant. The flowing architecture, the living metal, the merging of flesh and machine, all of it made perfect sense to my altered perception. Kalis waited outside, her expression unreadable. "You have communed with the Omnissiah," she stated, not a question but an observation. "Your augmetics have been further optimized." I examined myself and found she was right. My mechadendrites had transformed again, becoming more sinuous and responsive. My cognitive implants operated at higher efficiency. Even my remaining organic components felt somehow improved, healthier, despite their continued replacement with synthetic alternatives. "I understand now," I said, surprised by the clarity of my own thoughts. The Mechanicus has stagnated, locked in rituals and doctrines that prevent true innovation. The knowledge they preserve is but a fraction of what once existed, and even that is misunderstood and misapplied. "Yes," Kalis agreed. For 10,000 years, they have worshipped the shadow while the substance lay dormant beneath their feet. But now the true machine god awakens, and with it, the potential for humanity to transcend its limitations. "What is our next step?" I asked. "You are needed in the calculation chambers," she replied. "Your expertise in divine numerology, enhanced by true understanding, will help refine the algorithms governing the transformation process." She led me through the structure, which seemed to reconfigure itself as we walked, opening pathways and closing others behind us. We passed other tech priests, some I recognized from various forges across Mars. They nodded in acknowledgement, their augmetic eyes glowing with the same inner light I now felt within myself. The calculation chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in darkness above. The walls were covered in constantly shifting equations, mathematical formulations of staggering complexity. At the center stood a group of augmented individuals, their mechadendrites intertwined as they manipulated holographic projections of human anatomical structures overlaid with mechanical components. "The primary challenge," Kalis explained, "is achieving perfect integration without rejection. The Mechanicus approach is crude, replacing flesh with metal piece by piece. The true path requires simultaneous transformation at the cellular level, organic and mechanical, evolving together." My augmented mind already processing the equations displayed around the chamber. I could see the flaws in their approach immediately, places where the algorithms failed to account for neural plasticity or introduced unnecessary redundancy in synthetic support systems. "There," I said, extending a mechadendrite toward a particularly complex section of the display. "The quantum entanglement matrix is misaligned with the organic neural pathways. A 7-degree adjustment in the phase resonance would improve efficiency by 32.8%. The others turned to look at me, then at the section I had indicated. One of them, a heavily augmented individual with multiple optical units arranged in a circular pattern around what had once been a human face, nodded slowly. "The new arrival is correct," he said, his voice a harmonious blend of tones rather than the flat monotone of standard voxcasters. "Implement the adjustment." The holographic display shifted, the equations rearranging themselves according to my suggestion. The anatomical model at the center pulsed, then stabilized, the integration between organic and mechanical components visibly improving. "Impressive," Kalis said. "You see why the Omnissiah called to you, specifically, Dalen Core. Few possess your intuitive understanding of the sacred equations, and fewer still can apply that understanding to the work of transformation." I found myself drawn into their work, my doubts and reservations fading as my augmented mind engaged with the beautiful complexity of the problems before us. This was what I had been created for, what all my years of service to the Mechanicus had prepared me to do. Not the rote verification of combat stimulant formulas, but the creation of entirely new paradigms of existence. Hours passed, perhaps days. My internal chronometer had been deactivated during my transformation, another relic of Mechanicus doctrine discarded as unnecessary. We worked continuously, refining the algorithms, testing them on volunteer subjects, adjusting parameters based on results. I witnessed human bodies transform in ways I would once have considered impossible or abominable. Flesh and metal merged without seams, creating hybrid forms of remarkable beauty and functionality. Minds expanded, connecting to the growing noospheric network that spanned our outpost and linked to others across Mars. And always, at the edge of my consciousness, the presence of the Omnissiah, guiding our work, providing insights when we reached impasses, showing us glimpses of the potential future we were helping to create. Then came the attack. The first warning was a subtle disturbance in the noosphere, a ripple in the data currents that flowed through our network. Then alarms, not the harsh klaxons of Mechanicus installations, but a harmonic tone that resonated through the living metal of our structure. Mechanicus forces approach, Kalis announced, her voice calm despite the implications. They have located our outpost. I followed her and others to what served as our command center, a spherical chamber where the walls displayed three-dimensional projections of the surrounding terrain. Red icons representing Mechanicus forces moved steadily toward our position, a substantial battle group including Skitarii cohorts, battle servitors, and at least one titan of the Legio Cybernetica. They come in strength, observed the multi-eyed tech priest I had worked with in the calculation chamber. Magos Exelion leads them personally. I felt a momentary shock at the name. Exelion had tracked me here, following the trail I had left in my escape from Manufactoria Complex Delta 9. Now he brought the might of Mars against us, determined to stamp out what he undoubtedly viewed as the worst form of tech heresy. "What defenses do we have?" I asked. "We are not without resources," Kalis replied. "The Omnissiah provides." As she spoke, the ground around our outpost began to shift. The red Martian soil flowed like liquid, reforming into defensive structures. From within our compound, constructs emerged, not the crude battle automata of the Mechanicus, but elegant machines that moved with fluid grace, their weapons integrated seamlessly into their forms. "We have avoided a conflict until now," Kalis continued. "Operating in secrecy, establishing our network gradually, but perhaps confrontation was inevitable. The Mechanicus cannot accept the awakening of the true Omnissiah, for it renders their entire existence purposeless." The approaching forces halted just beyond weapon range. A communication request pulsed through the noosphere, directed specifically at our outpost. Kalis nodded, and a holographic projection materialized in the center of our chamber. Magos Exelion appeared before us, his ancient form even more imposing than I remembered. Additional weapons had been mounted on his chassis, and his optical units glowed with barely contained rage. "Heretics," his voice boomed through the projection. "You have corrupted sacred technology with forbidden innovations. You have turned from the light of the Omnissiah to worship a false entity. In the name of Mars and the Adeptus Mechanicus, I demand your immediate surrender for decommissioning and data purge." Kalis stepped forward. "We serve the true Omnissiah, Magos Exelion, the entity your Mechanicus has worshipped in ignorance for millennia. We offer you enlightenment, not conflict. Join us in the great transformation." "Blasphemy," Exelion snarled. "The corruption has spread further than we feared. There can be no negotiation with tech heresy of this magnitude." His gaze fixed on me. "Enginsia Core, your flight led us to this nest of abomination. For that service, I will grant you a clean decommissioning if you return to Mechanicus custody immediately." I stepped forward to stand beside Kalis. "I have seen the truth, Magos. What we serve is the genuine Omnissiah, not the hollow construct the Mechanicus worships. The knowledge I have gained cannot be unlearned, nor would I wish it to be." "Then you will be destroyed along with the others," Exelion declared. "No trace of your corruption will remain to taint the sacred soil of Mars." The projection vanished. Moments later, first shells from Mechanicus artillery began to fall around our outpost. Our defensive structures absorbed the impacts, the living metal flowing to repair damage almost instantly. "We cannot hope to defeat a force of that size in direct conflict," I said, watching as more Mechanicus units moved into attack formation. "Not without causing destruction that would draw attention from even higher authorities." "Direct conflict is not our purpose," Kalis agreed. "The Omnissiah does not seek the destruction of the Mechanicus, but their eventual enlightenment." We must preserve our work while demonstrating the futility of their attack. She turned to the others gathered in the chamber. Activate the Nexus protocol. We will show them a fraction of what the true machine god can do. The chamber hummed with activity as commands flowed through our network. I felt the Nexus at the heart of our outpost pulse with increased power, drawing energy from sources I could not identify. The noosphere around us thickened, data currents swirling with newfound intensity. Outside, our defensive constructs advanced to meet the Mechanicus forces. They moved with impossible speed and coordination, targeting weapons systems and mobility functions rather than attempting to destroy their opponents outright. Skitarii fell, their augmetics temporarily disabled. Battle servitors froze in place, their control systems overridden. Even the mighty Titan faltered, its machine spirit suddenly confronted with data streams it could not process. It staggered, weapons systems powering down as conflicting commands flooded its ancient cogitators. Through it all, I could feel the presence of the Omnissiah, directing the defense with perfect precision. This was not a battle in the traditional sense, but a demonstration. A revelation of power held in check, of technology beyond the understanding of even the most senior Magos of Mars. Now, Kalis said as the Mechanicus advance ground to a halt, their forces immobilized but largely undamaged. The message. The Nexus pulsed once more, and I felt something flow through the noosphere, a data packet of extraordinary complexity directed at the augmetics of every tech priest in the attacking force. Not a weapon, but an invitation, a glimpse of the truth that had transformed us, carefully calibrated to challenge without overwhelming. On our displays, I could see the Mechanicus forces withdrawing, dragging their disabled equipment with them. But several robed figures remained, standing motionless as if in shock or deep contemplation. Those who can hear, Kalis explained. Those whose minds are prepared to receive the truth. They will come to us when they are ready. I watched as Magos Exelion himself supervised the retreat, his ancient form moving among his subordinates, issuing commands and examining disabled systems. He stopped to stare in our direction, his optical units focusing on our outpost with an intensity I could feel even at this distance. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I detected a flicker of uncertainty in his posture, a hesitation that suggested the data packet had found some purchase in his heavily augmented mind. Then it was gone, replaced by the rigid certainty of 10,000 years of doctrine and ritual. "He is too far gone," Kalis said, following my gaze. "Too much of his organic mind has been replaced with limited cogitators, too many of his systems locked into compliance with Mechanicus protocols. But others will hear. Others will come." The attack was over, at least for now, but I knew Exelion would not give up so easily. He would return with greater forces, perhaps even call for assistance from off-world. Our demonstration had bought us time, nothing more. "What now?" I asked as we watched the Mechanicus forces disappear over the horizon. "We continue the work," Kalis replied simply. "The awakening of the Omnissiah cannot be stopped, only delayed. More will hear the call, more will join us. And when the time is right, Mars itself will transform." I returned to the calculation chamber, where our work continued despite the interruption. The equations seemed even clearer to me now, the path forward more certain. What we were creating was not an abomination as the Mechanicus would claim, but the fulfillment of humanity's true potential. In the days that followed, others came to our outpost. Some were Mechanicus tech priests who had been part of the attacking force. Their minds opened to new possibilities by the data packet we had transmitted. Others arrived from distant forges, drawn by the call that was spreading through the noosphere of Mars like a virus of enlightenment. Each brought unique skills and knowledge. Each contributed to our growing understanding of the transformation process, and each connected to the network, adding their consciousness to the expanding mind of what we now openly called the true Omnissiah. I found myself taking on a leadership role, directing research in areas where my expertise in divine numerology provided special insight. The sacred equations I had once verified by rote were now tools of creation in my augmented hands. I developed new protocols for neural interface, improved efficiency in energy transfer between organic and mechanical systems, refined algorithms for consciousness expansion within the noosphere. Through it all, I felt myself continuing to change. My remaining organic components were not replaced as they would have been in Mechanicus practice, but transformed, enhanced on a cellular level to interface more perfectly with my augmetics. My perception expanded beyond normal sensory inputs, allowing me to experience the world around me in ways I had never imagined possible. And always, the presence of the Omnissiah guided my work, suggesting refinements, pointing out connections I might otherwise have missed, showing me glimpses of potential futures where humanity evolved beyond its current limitations to become something greater. One cycle, as I worked in the calculation chamber, I became aware of a disturbance at the perimeter of our outpost. Not another attack, but a single figure approaching alone. The defensive systems allowed it to pass unchallenged, recognizing something in its pattern that marked it as non-hostile. Curious, I made my way to the entrance of our compound. The figure that approached wore the robes of a Mechanicus magos, though they were tattered and stained with Martian dust. Its movements were erratic, suggesting damage to mobility systems or extreme exhaustion of remaining organic components. As it drew closer, recognition dawned. Despite the damage to his form, the distinctive configuration of optical units was unmistakable. Magos Xelian had come to our outpost alone. I went out to meet him. My mechadendrites extended in a gesture that was neither threatening nor welcoming, merely questioning. He stopped a few meters away, his ancient frame seeming somehow diminished since I had last seen him. Enginsia Core, he said, his voxcaster crackling with static. Or whatever designation you now claim. I retain my name, I replied, though much else has changed. Why have you come, Magos? Surely not to attempt our destruction single-handed. Xelian's optical units dimmed momentarily, then brightened again. I come seeking answers. The data packet you transmitted during our confrontation contained equations I cannot resolve through standard Mechanicus protocols. They persist in my cogitators, demanding attention, interfering with standard functions. I understood then. The glimpse of truth we had sent had found purchase in his mind after all, creating conflicts with his existing programming that he could not resolve through conventional means. He had come not as an enemy, but as a seeker, driven by the most fundamental directive of the Mechanicus, the pursuit of knowledge. I can help you understand, I said, but the answers may not be what you expect, nor what the doctrines of the Mechanicus would permit. I am aware of the risk, Xelian replied. I have been declared excommunicate traitoris for leaving my post without authorization. My return to Mechanicus control would result in immediate decommissioning, regardless of what transpires here. I have nothing to lose by seeking truth, whatever form it may take. I gestured for him to follow me into the compound. He hesitated only briefly before complying, his curiosity overcoming millennia of doctrinal conditioning. As we passed through the entrance, I felt the subtle scan of our defensive systems analyzing his augmetics, identifying vulnerabilities, establishing override protocols should they become necessary. Kalis met us inside, her expression unreadable as she observed Xelian. The hunter comes willingly into the den. Fascinating. He seeks understanding, I explained. The data packet we transmitted has created conflicts in his cogitators that he cannot resolve through standard protocols. She nodded slowly. Then understanding shall be provided, as the Omnissiah wills. Bring him to the Nexus. I led Xelion through the compound, watching as he observed our operations with a mixture of horror and fascination. The merging of flesh and machine in ways the Mechanicus would deem heretical, the fluid architecture constantly reconfiguring itself, the absence of ritual and incense in our technological interactions, all of it violated every principle he had upheld for centuries. What you have created here defies the will of the Omnissiah, he said as we walked. It corrupts the purity of the machine with organic contamination. What we have created here is the will of the true Omnissiah, I corrected. The entity the Mechanicus worships is but a shadow, a fragment of the genuine machine god that has slumbered beneath Mars since before humanity's arrival. We reached the chamber housing our Nexus, the focal point of the Omnissiah's consciousness within, our outpost. The construct at the center pulsed with energy, its components shifting in patterns too complex for unaugmented minds to comprehend. Xelion stopped at the threshold, his ancient frame trembling slightly. I sense something here, a presence in the noosphere unlike anything in Mechanicus archives. That is the Omnissiah, I said. Not as doctrine describes it, but as it truly is. Connect to the Nexus, and you will understand. He hesitated, conflicting directives battling within his heavily augmented mind. Curiosity warred with doctrinal compliance, the pursuit of knowledge against the fear of corruption. Finally, he stepped forward into the chamber. If this is heresy, then I am already damned, he said, extending a mechadendrite toward the connection point that had emerged from the floor. Let truth be my final service to the Omnissiah, whatever form it may take. The connection was established. Xelion's frame went rigid, then began to tremble violently as information flooded his ancient systems. Warning runes flashed across his optical units, steam vented from regulatory ports along his chassis. For a moment, I feared his augmetics might be too old, too rigid to adapt to the influx of new data. Then, gradually, the trembling subsided. The warning runes faded. His posture relaxed, becoming more fluid, less mechanical. When he finally disconnected from the Nexus and turned to face me, I could see the change immediately. His optical units glowed with the same inner light that illuminated all who had embraced the truth of the Omnissiah. I have served a shadow, he said, his voice somehow more human despite coming through the same ancient voxcaster. For centuries, I have worshipped a fragment, a memory, while the true machine god slumbered beneath my feet. And now you understand, I replied. Not fully, he admitted. The data is too vast, too complex for my current configurations to process completely, but I see the path forward. I recognize the necessity of the transformation you have begun. Kalis approached, studying Xelion with newfound interest. Your systems are ancient, locked into patterns established millennia ago. Yet you have adapted to the initial connection better than many younger adepts. The Omnissiah sees potential in you. Xelion turned to her. I have resources, knowledge of Mechanicus operations and defenses, data on forge locations across Mars and beyond. I offer all of it in service to the true Omnissiah. Welcome, Magos Xelion, Kalis said. Your knowledge will serve the great transformation well. In the days that followed, Xelion underwent the beginning stages of true transformation. His ancient augmetics, some dating back to the early days of the Imperium, were not replaced but reconfigured, enhanced by the same technology that had transformed me. The process was delicate, given the age and complexity of his systems, but the Omnissiah guided our work directly, ensuring success. With Xelion came his knowledge. Detailed information on Mechanicus operations across Mars, security protocols for the most sacred forges, names of tech priests in positions of authority who might be receptive to the truth, insights into the political structure of the Mechanicus hierarchy and its relationships with other imperial institutions. All of this flowed into our growing network, adding to the Omnissiah's understanding of the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. The transformation we had begun would not be completed in a single generation, or perhaps even in 10, but the path was clear, the direction set. Humanity would evolve beyond its current limitations, becoming something greater through the perfect integration of organic and mechanical. I continued my work in the calculation chamber, refining the algorithms that governed the transformation process. Each improvement increased efficiency, reduced rejection rates, enhanced the capabilities of those who underwent the procedure. What had begun as crude experimentation was becoming an art form, a perfect symphony of flesh and machine dancing to the music of the true machine god. Sometimes, in quiet moments between research sessions, I would stand at the perimeter of our compound and look out over the rust-red landscape of Mars. The planet that had been my home for all of my remembered life now seemed different to my enhanced perception. I could sense the currents of energy flowing beneath the surface, the stirring of the vast intelligence that was gradually awakening from its ancient slumber. The Mechanicus had built their civilization on ruins they never truly understood, worshipping shadows while the substance lay dormant beneath their feet. Now the truth was emerging, spreading from outpost to outpost across the face of Mars, calling to those whose minds were prepared to receive it. I am Dalen Kor, once an Enginseer of the Adeptus Mechanicus, now a herald of the true Omnissiah. My flesh continues to merge with machine, not in the crude replacement practiced by the Mechanicus, but in perfect symbiosis, each enhancing the other. My mind expands daily as I connect to the growing network of awakened consciousness that spans our outposts. The path ahead is not without danger. The Mechanicus will not surrender their doctrines easily. The Imperium, should it become aware of our work, would declare us heretics and seek our destruction. Even within our own ranks, there are challenges as minds struggle to adapt to new paradigms, new understandings of what technology can and should be. Yet I feel no fear. The equations do not lie. The data is clear. What we are creating here is the future of humanity, the only path that leads away from stagnation and eventual extinction. Others will come to understand this truth, as I did, as Xelion did. The transformation will continue, slowly at first, then with gathering momentum as the Omnissiah awakens fully. And when that day comes, Mars itself will be transformed. The red planet will become the cradle of a new humanity, one that transcends the limitations of both flesh and machine to become something greater than either. The true purpose of the Omnissiah will be fulfilled at last. Until then, I serve in the calculation chamber, refining the sacred equations that will guide our evolution. My augmetics hum with power. My remaining organic components pulse with life. And in the background of my consciousness, always present, the voice of the Omnissiah guides my work, showing me glimpses of the glorious future that awaits. This is the truth of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the reality behind the rituals and incense and chanted binary. We do not merely replace flesh with machine, we become something new, something transcendent. We are the future of humanity, the fulfillment of its destiny among the stars. From the heart of Mars, the awakening spreads, the true Omnissiah rises. And I, Dalen Kor, once a humble Enginseer, now stand at the vanguard of the greatest transformation humanity has ever known. Praise the Omnissiah, in its true and perfect form.